Hi everyone, glad to be here today, and thanks for joining me. So, a CEO by far isn't the only person involved in leading an effort to improve employee engagement, but the CEO is a critical one. In our experience with over 40,000 workplaces, the ones that have strong CEO leadership are the ones that achieve their goals for increased employee engagement. The ones that don't have strong CEO support experience rapid failure, or perhaps even worse, a slow lingering death of the hopes of employees to have an impact on the organization and on their local work environment. But a CEO's time is limited, and the amount that can be devoted to the notion of employee engagement robs the time that could be spent on other important items: strategy deployment, process improvement, connecting to new markets. Those are all extremely important things for a CEO to pay attention to. So, what do CEOs absolutely need to know about employee engagement so they can decide if they'll commit their time and scarce company resources to employee engagement? And what are some of the secrets that top workplaces use to keep their employees highly engaged? Those are the topics we'll explore in this webinar.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Lisa Burke, and I will moderate our webcast. Today's presentation at any time using the Questions tab. Tom will answer as many as time allows, but we'll also send a complete Q&A summary to your inbox. Workplace Dynamics is a leading provider of technology-based employee engagement tools that help leaders to unlock potential, inspire performance, and achieve amazing results within their organizations. The research partner behind the Top Workplaces program, Workplace Dynamics, has surveyed more than 40,000 organizations representing well over 14 million employees across the United States. Presenting today is Tom Devane, the Vice President of Workplace Consulting here at Workplace Dynamics. A seasoned consultant, he specializes in employee engagement, cross-functional collaboration, action planning, and change management. Tom has extensive experience in both the public and private sectors, helping major organizations such as Microsoft Corporation, Johnson & Johnson, AT&T, and Honeywell with strategy development and process improvement. He is the co-author of the Change Handbook and the author of Integrating Lean Six Sigma in High-Performance Organizations. Tom holds BS and MS degrees in finance from the University of Illinois, and he's certified in several programs, including Harvard University's Contemporary Leadership, DISC, and Designing Organizational Structures, just to name a few. So let me hand the presentation to you, Tom. Welcome.
Hi everyone, thank you Lisa. Glad to be here today, and thanks for joining me. So, a CEO by far isn't the only person involved in an effort to improve employee engagement, but the CEO is a critical one. In our experience with over 40,000 workplaces, the ones that have strong CEO leadership are the ones that achieve their goals for increased employee engagement. The ones that don't have strong CEO support experience rapid failure, or perhaps worse, a slow lingering death of the hopes of employees to have an impact on the organization and on their local work environment. But a CEO's time is limited, and the amount that can be devoted to the notion of employee engagement robs the time that could be spent on other important CEO items: strategy deployment, process improvement, connecting to new markets. Those are all extremely important things for a CEO to pay attention to. So, what do CEOs absolutely need to know about employee engagement so they can decide if they'll commit their time and scarce company resources to employee engagement? And what are some of the secrets that top workplaces use to keep their employees highly engaged? Those are topics we'll explore this webinar. Here's what we'll do today. First, we're going to reveal 6 hard facts about employee engagement. We'll also provide you with some practical takeaways and actions. We're going to share 7 best practices that top workplaces use to increase employee engagement and make a bottom line impact. Finally, we're going to come through and then finish up and answer your questions. Now, one more housekeeping item before we get started. We're going to do some live polling throughout the presentation today using some polling software called Poll Everywhere. It's totally optional. If you'd like to log on to your smartphone, if you'd like to influence the flow of the presentation, here's your chance. as I'll be checking the poll responses and sharing them with you throughout the presentation. Participation is easy. Just go to www.pollev.com/CEO-ENG, and that's for CEO engagement, in your browser on a tablet or a smartphone. There are no downloads required or plugins you need to install, so don't worry about this. It's a very non-intrusive process. Questions will get pushed to you automatically, and you'll be able to see a live response on your webinar screen. So try to log in right now, and you should be seeing something on your screen. What we're going to be asking you in the first question is, what describes your position? This is what it'll look like when we actually come through. So it sounds like we've got some responses already. If you don't happen to be seeing that question, no problem. You've likely got one of two messages. If the software is asking you to log in, it's probably chopped off the co-ENG part and just entered pollev.com. And sometimes it defaults to that. Go ahead and type in the /CEO-ENG for CEO engagement, and you'll be all set. If the software says you've reached the end of the internet and shows a picture of someone kind of falling off a cliff, check to make sure that the CEO-ENG at the end of the URL is spelled correctly, because usually that means that it turns out that that's not spelled correctly. Okay, so people are entering their answer. That's great. This gives me an idea as far as who is on the call today, and this actually helps tailor our presentation.
Just know that if you mistakenly hit the wrong selection, no problem. Just hit the clear response button at the bottom of your screen and then select the correct one.
So fantastic. Looks like we've got a good variety of folks here. Lots of human resources folks. Senior leadership team is on. Head of the organization is on. So if you're still entering, go right ahead and keep entering, and we're just going to proceed, and you'll be able to enter until the next question. So the current state of what's going on in employee engagement in the United States is the current state really is 33% of employees are engaged. This translates into lost productivity of $500 billion. That's huge. So this ought to get the attention really of the C-suite as we take a look at this. In workplace dynamics, we tend to think of engagement as an emotional connection that an employee has that drives that employee to expend discretionary effort on the organization's goals that benefit both the employee and the company. Now, note the two-way nature of engagement. Everybody gets something worthwhile from an engaged employee. So, why is engagement important? Well, it's a key that can unlock potential in employees that's often latent, just waiting to be put to use. When employees come to work every day engaged, they are inspired to perform at their highest level. And when you have an engaged workforce, you'll see amazing results. One of the things that really resonates with CEOs is when the CEO understands that if employees are engaged, all of a sudden you have hundreds, or if your organization is large, even thousands of people every day dedicated to actually solving problems and looking for opportunities. If you're a traditional organization that's not so engaged, the managers are pretty much taking on that responsibility to motivate the employees to do that. But when you have an engaged workforce, you'll see amazing results because everybody is working for the strategic goals in the organization.
Great. So we're going to start going through some of the cold hard facts for CEOs. Cold hard fact number 1, disengaged employees cost you money.
Now, this can be a tough message to accept because it may seem counterintuitive at first glance. So what's absolutely the best way to get a message across to someone? Well, it's best to speak the language of the person you're speaking with. If you're speaking to someone at the check-in desk at a Beijing hotel, your best bet would be to speak Chinese, not English or Spanish. If you're sitting at an outdoor restaurant at the Champs-Élysées and you want to order lunch, you'll get a faster response if you order in French versus in Mandarin Chinese. So given that a message is best delivered in the language of the recipient of the message, what's a good way to communicate the benefits of engagement to a CEO? Well, we need to keep in mind that one of the CEO's major responsibilities is to make sure the organization is financially viable. If employees are all engaged, but the organization has been hemorrhaging cash for the past 3 months, that's a huge business and financial problem that requires CEO attention. So, how can we get a CEO's attention for the topic of employee engagement? Well, one way is, let's start with an income statement. So why start by talking about an income statement? Well, an income statement shows an organization's performance over a specific period. It notes how the organization gets money in that's revenues, and how money goes out, those are expenses. A quick side note for different viewers. If you're a nonprofit, your organization will also have an income statement that your CEO cares about. If you're a government agency, the head of your agency will also be interested in money in and money out, and have an additional interest in fund accounting and tagging specific money for specific spending areas. In the end, what all boils down to is showing the head of the organization which parts of the money in and money out statement are affected by employee engagement or lack thereof. So, what if you're an HR person trying to influence a company to pay more attention to employee engagement? That's where you'd want to start. You want to be starting at the income statement. So now let's actually take another quick poll and see which parts of the income statement you think are impacted by disengaged employees. So go ahead and enter. You can enter, you select one. So we'll just select one of these. We've got revenues, direct costs, overhead costs, or a couple combinations of the above. So we'll take a little time for folks to actually enter. We've got some votes for A, B, and C. We've got overhead costs, yeah. We've got some revenues. All right, so folks are actually giving us a great vote for A, B, and C, which turns out to be the correct answer. All major categories of an income statement are affected. So retention costs go up. So this obviously affects your bottom line. This affects the direct costs for employees who are actually making products. Is you actually got to hire people to, if your talent leaves, you've got to train them. And so retention costs are something you need to take into consideration from a cost standpoint. Productivity goes down. If productivity goes down for people who are direct cost employees, then that's a direct cost. And that can easily happen because some of the research that we'll get to very shortly talks about the fact that poor productivity can actually cost you 21% in an employee. Next thing is quality goes down. Is if people are really engaged, what's going to happen is they're going to be making less mistakes, so there's going to have to be less corrections, there'll be less inspection, there'll be less overhead to go through and do the checking that's required. So that's one big thing. The other big thing is it also affects revenues, because let's face it, if you've got an engaged workforce, what happens is this engaged workforce is going to interact much better with your customers. And your customers then are actually going to be showing their allegiance by coming back and buying your products. If the customers are not happy, this costs you sales. And so it affects all the areas on an income statement: revenues, direct costs, as well as overhead costs. So you may note that the CEO is faced with the first time, if you're an HR person, you're going through and the CEO expresses some disagreement or maybe some healthy skepticism, saying, gosh, how does it affect all the parts of the income statement? You can say, that's fine. Let's take time out of the abstract, take it from the abstract, and let's take a look at some specifics on employee engagement math. And so this actually is from one of our clients that actually was in the Midwest. And what this engagement cost them when we loaded this in from their survey, based on the number of folks who said they were considering leaving, based on the percentage disengaged, based on their revenues, is the cost of lost talent for this organization that was $150 million in revenue, $375,000 in cost of lost talent, $1.6 million cost of lost productivity, and cost of poor quality, $4.8 million. For a grand total of $6.7 million, almost $6.8 million. So it is a model, and so is this the exact amount? Is it 6.9? Is it 6.2? That's not really what we're after here. What we want to show is the fact that there is a hard cost associated with disengagement, and it's not a small number. So let's take a look a little bit more deeper dive on some of the aspects of the income statement. So let's say I'm a CEO, and this is the first time I've seen this research, which is solid and well-grounded in the HR field. I'm going to get quite concerned about the financial drain of low engagement in the areas of lower productivity, absenteeism, and of course in regretful turnover when my most valued employees suddenly jump ship. The cost of replacing employees is enormous when you factor in hiring costs, orientation and training costs, lost productivity when the position isn't filled. Then there's that suboptimal productivity as the replacement comes up to speed. You've got missed opportunities and so on. So as we can see in this section, there's an enormous cost to having disengaged employees in the organization. Let's take a quick poll to get an idea where your organization is with respect to improving employee engagement. Let's take a look at employee engagement, how you actually approach this. Is it something that's a formal effort with allocated resource in a project plan? Is it part of your efforts to improve the business? So sometimes we say, well, we're going to do process improvement, perhaps Lean Six Sigma, and it's going to be a high participation event. And so a high participation event says we're going to have a lot of people involved that might normally be involved. That's another way. Sometimes it's kind of the hope strategy, which is, gee, we hope managers will take responsibility for this, but we don't really have a formal program either that's a direct employee engagement program or that's an indirect one that kind of supports some kind of business objective. Finally, topic isn't receiving any attention at all, and I'm happy to see that we're not getting many votes on this one. And we'll also mention, if it turns out you end up being in a room full of folks, the reason we like to do these individual polls is because everybody in the room can vote, and it's not just one vote.
So the good news is for the person who did vote that this is a topic that isn't receiving any attention at all, hopefully you can use in that previous section the way to communicate to your CEO using their language. So if you can fill out that income statement, if there's any information, even if you aren't privy to every aspect, you likely have a lot of the key pieces where you can start that conversation with the CEO. And again, speaking their language, helping them understand that poor employee engagement does have a direct bottom line effect.
And Lisa, thank you. In fact, as I take a look at this is pretty consistent with the information that we see at our clients.
Yeah.
Is we've got about a third, as far as it's a formal plan, as far as it's part of the business process, part of something we hope managers are going after. And there are a small handful, fortunately, that are kind of starting to get aware right now, which is great, and that's what today is all about. Like we like to say in this field, is there is no such thing as bad news. If you get some news and it confirms what you already thought, that's good news. If you get some news that's kind of bad that you might think isn't really so happy, that's also good news because it's something you didn't know and now you can go fix.
Yeah.
So here's your first takeaway. We have a series of takeaways here in the session today. You can use this sheet to calculate the financial cost of disengagement in your organization. And so we take a look at, we're just going to focus on 3 well-researched areas. There are more. So for one thing you think about is if I'm a CEO, I'd like a conservative estimate. This is a conservative estimate. We're only looking at 3 areas, but these are well-researched. One is the talent area. You can say, take your attrition percent that you've got, take the number of employees, take their average salary, that ends up being your cost. Take a look at from a productivity standpoint. What percentage of the population do you have that you think is disengaged? Multiply that by the number of employees, their average salary, and that's your cost. So again, if the whole notion of if 21%, and this is a great statistic that Gallup has researched, 21% is the productivity loss that you have for a disengaged employee, that means essentially you've got an employee who's working Monday through Thursday, and they're taking every Friday off. Last line is quality. So there we take your percentage of disengaged people. Then we like to say, we're still being very conservative and saying take between 5 and 15% of revenue, multiply that by your annual revenue, and that ends up being your total cost of quality. Add those all up, and you have disengaged cost for employees. Now, sometimes people ask, well, gosh, we're just new to this effort, so how do I figure out what my percentage of disengaged employees are? Well, here's some benchmark numbers for you. One thing we like to say is it's always best to get the actual percentage wherever you can. And an employee survey is one of the ways that you can go and do that. So in the absence of an employee survey, you're just starting out today, that's great, is you can think about in the average U.S. workplace, not a top workplace, is we're around 33%, as we mentioned earlier at the part of the presentation. So about 33% of your folks are actually going to be the folks who are the ones who are engaged. In a top workplace, and this is the survey competition that Lisa mentioned earlier, is in 44 major newspapers across the United States. We help them run their top workplaces competition every year. So the people in our benchmark are really aspiring top workplaces. Those are folks who think they're going to be able to make it, and top workplaces, those that have been named. So while the average U.S. workplace, the engagement rate is 33%, our average engagement rate is 67%. But once again, it's best to get the actual percentage from your survey, as then you can see the range can vary quite a bit.
So, cold hard fact number 2, show me the money isn't where it's at. What does that mean, Tom?
Well, while it may be characteristic of some athletes who are free agents, show me the money is not where it's at in organizations. So I often get this, this seems to be very much coming at me from the financial sector, is some of the folks I'll talk with in the C-suite say, well, gosh, we pay our employees very well, so why are they unhappy? Why are they leaving? And it turns out that when you look at the surveys, as their data tells us that people are leaving because they're not appreciated, because people aren't listening to their ideas, they don't figure there's a clear direction. That's one of the lowest correlation coefficients that we have, is salary to engagement. So if you take a look at this, we do then ask, if the data suggests showing the money isn't where it's at, what is critical to employee engagement? So what does our big data from 43 regions in the U.S. tell us? Well, here are the 3 statements on our survey that are most highly correlated with being an engaged employee. Let's count down to the top statements, starting with number 3. Number 3 is confidence in the leader. Make no mistake, the leader sets the tone for the organization. A command and control management style that gets cascaded down, that's problematic for the organization's morale. That's problematic for where people solve problems, because people typically solve problems and identify opportunities at the lowest level of the organization. But they can only do that if you have an engaged workforce. The second statement that's highly correlated with engagement is appreciation. And the statement is, I feel genuinely appreciated at this company. So how important is appreciation? Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of research out there on appreciation and people feeling kind of from a positive standpoint at work. Here's an experiment that could actually help to improve people's engagement at your workplace as well as positively affect their bottom lines. Interesting experiment. So put it on Outlook for 1 week. 3 times a week, say you want to give to a coworker, you want to go through and give some appreciation for what they have done. And when that pops up in your Outlook calendar, just kind of check that off. After a month, check and see what the real attitude of the department is, and do people feel like they're being more productive. What we found is usually after 2 to 3 weeks, people do feel a different change in what's going on.
So to be clear, what you're adding to your Outlook calendar is a reminder to yourself to appreciate someone else in your office?
Absolutely. Appreciate someone else in your office, and it's got to be genuine appreciation. It's not just something, hey, Lisa, nice job, nice dress today. No, that's something that you know, hey, I really appreciate the work you did on the report yesterday. It was so specific and it was so well researched. So genuine appreciation. It takes you maybe 10 seconds to do that. So well worthwhile. It has incredible impacts.
Thank you.
So we move down to the most important statement that's correlated is, I believe this company is headed in the right direction. Because, boy, as human beings, employees want a purpose in life. They want to know that a place where they spend 40 to 60 hours per week has intentions they agree with. And this is one of the statements that tells us that. So here's a second takeaway for you. Is as we take a look at these 3 high leverage areas we talked about, is we say each of those you can have a strategy at the department level and company level. For direction, you can go through and have a strategy broadcast and local goal connection session. At the company level, you can actually set up a nice crisp elevator speech for strategy and the greater good that it serves. And this last part, the greater good that it serves, ends up being very important from a directional standpoint, because people like to actually connect to a bigger purpose in life. See, appreciation at the department level, you could do that 3-week trial that we just talked about. At the company level, we could have company-wide engagement of employees living the values. Sometimes this is done electronically. It can be done through polls. Sometimes it's done through a suggestion box. Sometimes through simple emails. It's something you can actually do to increase appreciation. It's particularly confidence in leader. You can ask for questions for response via email or town halls. You can also, at the company level, do a town hall or other large group event with some information sharing and some role modeling. These end up being very, very critical things that you can do that can move that needle on appreciation.
Great. Cold hard fact number 3. Disengaged employees are silent killers.
Spotting the employee who's not working hard isn't always this easy. It's more of a mission like this. Can you pick out the disengaged employee here? Tough to do. Most disengaged employees don't advertise the fact that they're disengaged, but when you turn your back, there's trouble. Disengaged employees tend to spread disengagement like a virus. What are some ways they do this? Well, they have ways really too numerous to count. Here's one sad way. Marshall Goldsmith, who I've known for about 8 years now, is recognized as one of the 15 most influential business thinkers in the world in the biannual study sponsored by Forbes and London Times. And Marshall says that in his experience, the average employee spends 10 to 20 hours per month bashing their boss. That's half a work week every month, and those are just average employees. Those aren't the engaged, disengaged employees. Other time-stealing behaviors, and these you probably have seen in your organization, include pointing out parts of the company's strategy that appear nonsensical to the person who's disengaged, or reveling in the recounting of past organizational blunders to any available audience at the water cooler, replaying their conversations at their head with their boss where they wish they'd responded differently, and fantasizing about setting up organizational foes for disaster. These are all things that steal company time. And all these kinds of behavior, unfortunately, once they get going, are highly contagious. So we like to say, don't let these silent killers stalk your hallways. Here's the third takeaway for you for employee engagement roadmap. Is we take a look, we want to make sure that you can collect employee voices via an anonymous survey. We think this is a very important thing to do because this gives people, you can get 100% of your employees telling you what's going on. You can ask your workforce then, participate in the data. You can say, hey, what can be improved at the local level? We like to also make a distinction, what can be improved in departments. And if there's something systemic, those things can actually get brought up to upper management. We then say is getting the people involved in analyzing the data is one thing, but you also want them involved in developing some action steps for improvement. This is a very important thing to do because people start to feel ownership. As we like to say in organizational development circles, that people tend to own what they co-create. So let people co-create some stuff. You want to set up a structure then to make sure that these things are happening. You want to make sure you're tracking progress, any business results. And finally, this is a very important one, you want to be celebrating your successes. You don't want the notion of the tree falling in the forest, is there no sound? If something good happens, you want to actually let people know that something good has happened and that they've been responsible for that and that you're paying attention to that.
Cold hard fact number 4, ignoring disengaged employees is not wise.
Let's face it, lots is going on in your business environment that people in the C-suite need to pay attention to. That's for sure. And the question that pops up naturally is, but does employee engagement really deserve a place on our already busy agenda? The resounding answer is yes. As employee engagement levels really determine very important things like how much can get done in a day, the quality that's present in your products and services, and how high talent employees show up at work every day, and how they feel about working in their organization. Now, these aren't soft and squishy tree-hugging HR things. These are real business outcomes. Unfortunately, it's far too tempting to deal with low engagement levels with a certain level of benign neglect, thinking, oh, there's not really much I can do about improving engagement at levels anyway, or this quarter we really need to focus on the new strategy, or the new generation of our product line, or those problems we've been having with our supply chain. And then nobody thinks about employee engagement until the next employee survey, and the cycle starts all over again. Sound familiar? It happens in more clients than we would like to think. Don't let low employee engagement levels kill your business outcomes by ignoring them. Get ahead of the game. Here's your fourth takeaway. Now, to best allocate company resources, it's always best to do targeted improvement activities based on an employee survey. That is, get an idea what the employee voices are saying are the real issues. However, if you haven't conducted an anonymous survey, here's something that you might consider. Is you can get people in a department that groups no more than 25 people. If you got more than 25 people, have opportunities to have people elect representatives or hold multiple sessions and then combine results. You also want to ask them when they get together, what makes this a great place to work? And then you say, what could make this an even better place to work? This way you can get some pretty cheap input, and you can actually go ahead and you can have people feel a little bit engaged about getting forward and moving forward, even if you don't have the exact employee numbers. So, got a live poll right here. What we want to talk about is the notion of the CEO being visibly committed or not. So, another online poll. Take a few minutes.
That's great. Love to see that. Strongly agree about CEOs being personally and visibly committed to improving employee engagement. Wonderful. A little bit of neutral, not surprising. CEOs are people too, so we often see that spectrum of people having different experiences, and sometimes when CEOs are more experienced at being a CEO or less, we find that runs the spectrum. Good that there's no strongly disagrees. Wonderful. Almost half the people being committed, or CEOs being committed to improving employee engagement. That's wonderful.
And a lot of this could actually have to deal with the fact that we've got some CEOs on today, Lisa, that we've got some too, because one of the things that CEOs realize once you get going in some sort of an engagement initiative or engagement focus in your company is the fact that if you've got all these hundreds or thousands of people concerned about what's happening with the business every day, the CEO can elevate themselves and can focus on the really strategic thing, can deal more with customers, can look at new markets. Not often possible if the CEO is kind of playing whack-a-mole with performance problems all across the organizational silos. So, question, is Richard Branson a business model genius? Well, without a doubt. Take a look at his successes. But he's also had some pretty strong opinions that he's put into practice about interactions with employees. He wrote in a recent blog, put staff first. Remember that everything else in your business, staff should be number one above everything else in your business. If your people are happy and engaged, customers will follow. He further went on to say, I spent much of my time during the past 40 years working out how we take care of our staff at Virgin. These programs have been successful, and they're a great reminder that if you look after your people, they will look after your business.
Cold, hard fact number 5. Tom, I don't see one listed here.
Well, we've got a little bit of a build-up here, Lisa, and then we'll do a reveal at the end after we get some facts about this.
Okay.
So let's say for a moment that you're an HR VP wanting to improve engagement, but your CEO has historically resisted it. Not because it's not important, but because there are other, quote, higher priority areas this year, end quote. Then one day he has a Damascus Road experience with respect to engagement, is blinded by a sudden flash of light, falls off his horse and does a 180 on the need to address low employee engagement. Oh, that's great. Now we'll finally get some action. So, what's the first thing that often happens when the CEO decides it's time to deal with the engagement issue? Yes, that's right. The CEO picks up the phone, calls you as the VP of HR, and says, we have an engagement problem. You need to fix it. Well, of course, that only makes sense, right? Because HR is concerned with the people part of the business, and this is a people problem. HR professionals are the people advocates, closest to the theories of human motivation, most knowledgeable about intrinsic rewards, aren't they? Well, yes, but unfortunately, it's like HR is put in this box of people who deal with people problems. Now, there's a few problems with that. Namely, what you really need in this situation is someone with formal authority who can provide direction to the effort and give it legitimacy. You need people in who are with employees hold in high regard that can do a great job encouraging others. You need people who listen to when asked to go beyond their regular day job. You need people to budget, to hold celebrations at key milestones. So all this leads up to who should really be leading the charge for improved employee engagement? No, the leader of the organization, the CEO, or if you're a government agency, it's the head of that agency. Now, the top person can certainly get advisory help in project planning and tracking assistance from HR, as well as group facilitation of large high engagement events. But the CEO has to be the one perceived as leading the charge, and this has to trickle down throughout the management layers. Now, have I seen successful efforts started at the middle or lower levels of the organization? Yes. But they typically take much longer, and that would be the topic of another webinar. The bottom line is this. HR did not create the low engagement situation, has no formal clout to make any improvements happen, and is often viewed as a support department whose sage counsel about people is frequently ignored. As your fifth takeaway, here's a starter list you'll want to add as you get into the change effort. This is obviously a content-full topic, but this is what would fit on one slide in the webinar today. So this is meant to give you a flavor of different responsibilities. So the first one is the thing you want to do is announce the start of the engagement effort. This really goes through and confers organizational importance on it. So a senior team would lead this, and HR would assist this. Now, just a couple tips on initial engagement announcement. Clients typically take one of three approaches. One is kind of a pure, we're going to improve employee engagement initiative. The second option is people say, well, we need to change the culture, and engagement is part of that. Other organizations prefer to have an engagement improvement effort that's part of a larger business-based improvement activity, like rolling out a new strategy, Lean Six Sigma, some kind of a process re-engineering, or maybe a customer-centric type activity. So those are some options there. Next, what you want to do is you're going to want to actually go through and develop strategy, messages, vehicles, and feedback mechanisms. Senior team would contribute to this, but it really is HR that's going to lead that. You're going to want to go through and have periodic support and status meetings. You keep an eye on whether or not people are spending time on the activities they committed to and making sure they're not being pulled away by other priorities, which we find is one of the most common problems why these things don't get completed. Now, while the senior team would need to conduct these to demonstrate the importance of the organization, HR could be in the background there, making sure they're happening and that they're getting set up for success from the standpoint of logistics. If local leaders, like managers and volunteers who head up action planning teams, aren't set up to succeed, then the whole effort will tank. The senior team needs to allow time and resources for this, while HR can help by supporting these local leaders with the skills the local leaders may not have, like facilitation or project management. It's up to senior leaders to keep engagement top of mind for all in the organization. HR can provide a great service here by coordinating senior leader messages with the overall communication strategy. And one last item here talks about how you're going to track the progress of all the action plans that are being worked on to improve employee engagement. We found it's best to keep a central dashboard that shows all the action plans underway and their status. This helps keep competing priorities at bay, and coupled with the periodic status meeting mentioned above, it ensures you're going to get some positive business outcomes resulting from the initial opportunity areas identified. Now, again, we've noted that electronic dashboards tend to work best because pieces of paper and manila folders tend to get lost too easily.
So I have a question here, Tom, and I probably have a leading answer too, but I'm curious about your opinion. So if someone is watching this today and they recognize that they have a leader that could do maybe a couple of those items on the senior team, but not everything and not perfectly, should they even bother trying?
Oh, great question. And the answer is absolutely yes. What you need to do is you need to go through and figure out which skill sets are needed and who might have those skill sets around the organization. Sometimes, curiously enough, you might have, I've seen some areas where people think of engineers as these introverted people who don't like people. I've seen them some of the most passionate senior leaders for change to go through and start an engagement effort. So absolutely. So take a look kind of around the entire organization. This actually is one of the things we do from an engagement standpoint that we'll talk about with senior leadership teams in a few slides, and that is making sure the senior leadership team really is engaged. Peter Drucker talks about the notion of making sure that everyone's strengths are so well used that their weaknesses become irrelevant. That's what we want to do for an engagement of the senior leadership team.
Great, thank you. And to finish out cold hard fact number 5, it's that disengaged employees aren't HR's problem to fix.
So let's do a quick poll here. So let's just find out kind of the responsibility here. It could be an HR responsibility. Maybe the CEO has a personal passion for this. Is it owned by people in operations, the middle manager and frontline levels? Is it a joint effort for people in operations and HR? Is it an area that receives little direct attention? Okay, so we're coming in here.
Great. And again, not surprisingly, this is kind of a par for the course with a lot of organizations that we work with, that employee engagement is an HR responsibility. Interesting. And now we're seeing that it's a joint effort between people in operations and HR dominating. Great. We really appreciate everyone's participation in this. And remember too, once you're done with your poll question, as Tom continues through this, we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you'd like to submit in the GoToWebinar any questions, please feel free and we'll address those at the end.
Excellent. All right.
Cold hard fact number 6. Tom, it's missing again.
Absolutely. We've got another great build-up of some data, Lisa.
Okay.
All right. So your CEO has had the requisite Damascus Road experience, seen the light, and embraced employee engagement as a great value to the business. And furthermore, your CEO has taken to heart that cold hard fact number 5 and acknowledged that HR is not supposed to be leading the charge. It's really the CEO. All that having been accomplished, the CEO now sits back and begins to wonder, where does he need to begin? what's the best place to start? So we took a look at that. And so what we see, two things come to mind initially. When I've talked to a lot of CEOs, here are the two options that first pop into the CEO's mind. First is that it's got to be something that middle managers ought to be leading. Middle managers need to go through and lead the charge because they're kind of that conduit between the strategy and what goes on at the lower level. Other CEOs say, well, maybe it really ought to be something because I want to go to more of a full participation environment. So I want to start at the lowest level of the organization. So this is something that the two options that come through that seem to be immediately what people tend to think of. So is it really a grassroots level, or is it something middle managers? And the answer is no, no, and for good measure, one more no. As we look at these options, what really is missing? Well, the first thing we need to do is check and make sure that folks at the top of the organization are as engaged as they need to be. And this is really something that surprises many organizations. There was a manufacturing firm in Dallas that we worked with last year. And what happened was on the survey, which is an anonymous survey because we're a third party and people feel comfortable putting in the truth on a third-party survey, is what happened is we found out that 7 of 10 executives in the survey said they were looking for a new job. This was a shock to everybody. It was a shock to the CEO, and it was a shock to the other 6 people who thought they were the only one who thought they were being micromanaged. So that was something the senior team identified as something that needed to be worked on, because the easy thing to do is, what you want to do is make sure that check your engagement at the top. If you're administering a survey, it's a valuable and easy piece of information to collect. It's a nasty, colorful statement that the fish rots from the head down, but it's true in organizations, just as it's true in your little rowboat with your pile of striped bass. If engagement is low at the top, then that will get cascaded at light speed throughout the rest of the organization.
Cold hard fact number 6, engagement isn't just for frontline employees and middle managers.
Tolstoy, the Russian writer, philosopher, and social activist, once said, «Каждый думает изменить мир, но никто не думает изменить себя».
Which translated means everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. That's just as important as when Tolstoy said it years ago as it is right now.
So what are some actionable secrets of top workplaces?
So here are some actionable secrets of top workplaces that we want to give you. This is your 6th and final takeaway. This is going to be a list of 7 actionable secrets of top workplaces that we brought out for folks. First one, purposely measure, plan, and improve employee culture. So this is something that we say it's hard to improve something and know you're making progress if you don't have an idea of where you are now. So here I kind of go back to my previous consulting experience, and I say if you have a great employee survey, like what I've seen here, is that can save anywhere from a month to a month and a half worth of data collection. Is you don't have to do all these interviews, figure out is this the majority of the people said this, is this the minority. These are things that you can actually get an anonymous survey rolled up by a different number of different demographic cuts. It can be level in the organization, departments, all that kind of great stuff. The second thing is treating people as if they really are the greatest asset. Feeling appreciated and confidence and leadership are among the most important factors for being in a great place to work. Next is actually living and leading with purpose. And again, employees want to know their work is contributing to something meaningful. So effective leaders make sure there's an inspiring vision which the entire organization connects with day to day. Listen and act. The best leaders listen to feedback provided by employees both formally and informally. While some leaders might dwell on the inherent risk of giving employees a voice, leaders at top workplaces are clued into their team's challenges and use this knowledge in decision making. This builds a sense of commitment and accountability. Need to get into place a mechanism for comprehensive listening about critical topics. And the other important thing is to note is by virtue of the fact when you ask employees for information, there's an implied psychological contract, you're going to do something with that. So just make sure you do that. Next, you want to make sure we help managers help their team grow and achieve the company results that are desired. So managers really are the critical conduit downwards in the organization that transmits the strategy from the top of the organization to the front line, and the conduit upwards that transmits customer experiences and employee concerns upwards to top management. Far too many employees leave an organization today because of poor interactions with their managers. Number 6, facilitate employee ownership and leading innovation and execution. It's an age-old adage in smart organizations that people tend to own what they co-create. Organizations can gain a lot by distributing decisions and opportunities for input throughout the organization. Now, this isn't to say that Billy Bob in accounts payable is going to help set the company's strategy, but it does mean that people may get more of a say in their local work environment, communication upward gets a long-needed overhaul, and people tap into the power of the collective wisdom of people in groups, and not just on those select individuals who we used to ask. Often this is done in a group setting with an agenda that capitalizes on group analysis, group development of alternatives, group prioritization, and group action planning. Instead of drawing up new agendas from scratch, many leaders actually want to go through and use previously developed templates for such purposes. Here's a resource that may be helpful to you looking for proven methods that get groups productive quickly and engaged quickly. It's called the Change Handbook. It contains over 60 proven templates for convening engaging events for a variety of purposes, such as planning, people using the developing strategy, such as organizational structuring. You can often get a lot of input from people in the organization on what a new organizational structure might be, and they feel much more committed to making it work. We talk about building upon strengths. Also talk about problem solving. Another area is general organizational improvement. There are things that you can do to go through and actually get employees more involved in some sort of large-scale quality effort, like a Lean Six Sigma or process redesign. It also contains in this book, some contemporary group methods. Appreciative inquiry is something that folks have used it to a great benefit. Future search, open space, workout, World Cafe. These are all templates that people have used and proven before. So the thought is, why do we want to reinvent the wheel when something already exists out there? This reference book also supports our final action item, which is build community. Now, contemporary neuroscience research teaches us the importance people place on feeling accepted and safe in their tribe. It helps them stay focused and contributes to their success, the overall success of the organization too. In forging productive employee experiences, top workplaces care about building community and holding regular, purposeful events to foster a sense of belonging. That sense of contribution, achievement, and contribution and appreciation keeps employees connected and energized. So let's summarize. Here are 6 facts every CEO needs to know about engagement. First one, we talked about how there's a true dollars and cents business cost associated with employee engagement. Even beyond that business cost is the feeling that a CEO says, I can step up and do more strategic things if people are engaged in doing things throughout the entire organization. We talked about how financial rewards aren't what get people juiced about putting forth that extra effort inside the organization. That's something that actually is handled by a couple of other areas. Talk about how it's not always possible to see the disengaged employees who are dragging you down, and how a survey that guarantees anonymity can really help that out. We talked about avoiding that inertial pull that encourages inaction on the employee engagement front. We talked about how the leadership role needs to fall squarely in the executive suite with the CEO and not with the CEO and not with the HR folks as the primary leads. And finally, we talked about the importance of increasing the engagement levels of the senior management team, and not just having increased engagement as a goal for middle managers and employees. Now, let's open it up for questions, Lisa.
Great. Thanks, Tom. If you go back, this one right here, we actually got a great question from Tia. And the question is, what are the best steps if you're HR as well as on the senior leader team? Because it all seems to come back to HR.
Wow. Excellent question. So if you're HR and you do, and you've been fortunate enough to get a position on the senior leadership team, because quite honestly, in all cases, we find that's not the case. If you are on the senior leadership team, then you can take more of an active role and put in kind of a foot in both boats if you're kind of figuring out how to balance. Is you can do some of the things that say, well, we're going to schedule this, and we're going to make sure this gets on our agenda. You can be much more, I guess I would call a productive pest inside the senior leadership team meeting, saying, hey, we took that survey 3 weeks ago, and now we've tabled it for the last 3 weeks. Let's put that back on the agenda. So you can actually be the inside voice of folks who actually might not have that ability to do that. So you can act in both from the standpoint of being the person who's the senior leader that shows that this does have some organizational importance, and also the person that, if you're on the senior leadership team, you probably have some folks that work for you that actually can go through and help coordinate with logistics, make sure these things happen, make sure action plans are acted upon.
That's great. I can also say that from experience with clients, I've also seen HR leaders on senior leadership teams who were struggling to get the rest of the leadership team bought in about the importance of employee engagement. And when they found that there was a specific department that was struggling, they really worked with them and together had the person on HR and ultimately the person where who was responsible on the leadership team report back about the improvements that occurred in that small group. And then they were able to roll it out to the rest of the organization.
That's a great example, Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
What other questions do we have?
So someone's wanting to know, is it best to survey everyone at the same time when you're doing a survey?
Wow, that's a topic of increasing interest over the last couple of years. So what we like to talk about is your survey strategy should include an annual survey at least where you ask all the people all the questions. Now, this is something that, we have a very economical set of questions, about 22 questions or so, actually get to the heart of the matter, what you need. But we also say that with current technology, we now have the capability to survey people year-round as long as it doesn't seem like we're bugging them. So how do we seem like we're not bugging them? Well, what we do is we move to the notion of a pulse survey. So in a pulse survey, we might come and pick a particular topic of interest. Maybe it's something that was a low score that we're now trying to work on increasing for next year so that maybe appreciation gets better. We can then go through, and maybe every 3 weeks or so, we can ask 1 or 2 questions in a pulse survey. That keeps it very low maintenance for folks. They don't feel it's intrusive. And if we can do a little bit different too from technology, is we like to see apps on mobile phones, because this is where people can actually do these surveys. They can actually do these at home. They can actually look at these when they're on the phone. They don't need to be at work. And it seems very non-intrusive. You check off boxes and your survey's done. Great.
So I heard that it is best to survey everyone at the same time, at least once a year.
Correct.
Great.
And that's part of your strategy. That's kind of your punctuated point of doing a check-in for everybody. It's your annual doctor's checkup.
There you go. Perfect. Robert was asking, how do you sell the idea of doing an employee survey?
Yeah, this is really this is one of the challenges that folks, when there's kind of organizational inertia, and it's sitting there as people say, well, gosh, we don't do a survey now. We're making money. We're successful in our marketplace. The question is, how much more successful could you be? And so one of the ways that we do this is we talked about earlier, we recommend our first takeaway sheet that shows to the CEO what the financial benefits are of engagement. So that's one huge way to do it. You can also talk to the CEO about a couple other things. So you can say that, gosh, CEO, there are hundreds or thousands of people who could be working for you if they're engaged. You have the ability to do that if they are engaged. But how do we know if they're engaged or not? Well, the best way to do this is a survey. And some people would say, well, gosh, a survey is a great thing, and so we'll just go through and set something up from an electronic survey and do an in-house survey. We like the notion of a benchmark survey, because what's going to happen is if your entire organization comes back and they say agree for a particular statement, you don't know if your competitors have said that agree is the average, or is it strongly agree, or is it neutral. So we really want to actually go in and do benchmark type things. So once you figure out what the benefits are, and again, framing the benefits for the CEO, it has financial impact, enables the CEO to do more strategic things. Problems really end up getting identified at the local level, and problems identified getting fixed at the local level, end up getting fixed at the local level if people are engaged.
Great, thank you. Coming back around to that theme again one more time, Kara asked, how do you get a reluctant senior manager on board? For instance, I have one who says, quote, they don't deserve praise, it's part of their job, end quote.
That's I do see this quite a bit, actually. It's problematic if you've got an entire senior management team of folks who have this attitude. It's not so problematic if you've got 1 or 2 senior managers out of perhaps 8, and what can happen is when you're doing some senior management conversations and discussions and senior management development, we like to think of, getting together periodically, senior managers, to amplify their strengths and know what each other's strengths and weaknesses are so they can complement those and compensate for them. So if they do that, people would have a conversation about this. And the CEO could say, we're actually going to more of an appreciative environment, and we'd like to set some goals for this for the next month or so. And we're going to be checking in with employees to find out if they feel a bit more appreciated. It's interesting because people often think that we go through and we think what needs to go on, then we go through and we act something, and then we have our emotions that are feeling. But what happens really is it's a reverse of that, is people end up feeling something. So I feel appreciated or not, and then I go through and I end up acting on that, and then I think and explain myself into it. And so even though we got a senior manager who says they don't want to actually give praise, what we find is it's often easier to ask that person to try it out for a couple of weeks and come back and report on it and see what that person has actually found. What that person will find is they probably have they have an easier time of influencing people. They have an easier time of getting things done. And so it becomes more ingrained in their behavior. Often, we like to say that often it's easier for people to act their way into a new way of thinking than it is to think their way into a new way of acting.
Great answer. And that is a lot of the neuroscience space that we work with. And I want to thank everybody for these questions. Keep them coming in. There's a question here that's a little bit about, isn't employee engagement the result of culture shift as opposed to the result of a program? So there's kind of a follow-up of, if we're rolling out an employee engagement program, could it, a cynic look at it as something like, oh, they're just trying to make us feel engaged, and therefore it would result in even lower employee engagement?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because definitely people can perceive that if engagement is being put out as something that is going to benefit just the company, like we want more engaged employees. As we mentioned earlier, in Workplace Dynamics, we like to think of engagement as a two-way street. Engagement is something that, yes, it's going to benefit the employee or the company, because the employee is going to put up some discretionary effort and energy. But it's also going to benefit the employee because they feel that they're contributing to something. They feel appreciated. And so as part of an engagement effort, we often go through and we recommend that managers have conversations with employees about what their skills are, what they'd like to be working on, where they would actually like to be in the next couple of years, and have these periodically instead of just once a year when you're going in and giving people their annual salary review, when all they're really listening then is X%, then they walk out not thinking about development. And so this is one way that we say employee engagement isn't just the result of a culture shift, that we're doing it to somebody. This is something we can actually start at the grassroots level. Now the other thing I would say is it's true that engagement is a byproduct of doing culture things well, but I would also say think of it as a circle. There are certain engaging behaviors that a leader can do that will actually change the culture, that will then change people's view on engagement. And so, for example, engaging behaviors is they might call some more town hall meetings. They might have, as a result of the town hall meetings, they might have 3 or 4 areas of interest that people would actually want to hold focus groups on. Great. People get involved in that. And so there are ways you can actually cascade this down that's both, yes, engagement is a byproduct, but also the leadership behaviors can also be a starting point.
Great. Here's one from Natasha. How do you measure the success of engagement?
Successful engagement. There's a lot of research that's out there, and most of the folks who actually, the HR community has agreed on 3 different criteria. And one thing that you don't want to do in an engagement survey is you don't want to have a question about, I am engaged. That's way too easy to game. It's way too easy. It doesn't really tell you what's going on. We like in our survey to measure the behavioral outcomes of engagement. And so behavioral outcome is, how can we actually see that engagement's happening? Well, one way is if an employee recommends that other people should come to work at this place. That's one way. Another way is that do employees feel motivated to actually come into work every day and give their very best? Another one is the employee saying, gosh, I haven't looked for another job within the past month. So these are three well-researched behavioral criteria that if you have these and you ask folks these, we'd like to say that you've got to slightly agree or better on all these in our survey to be considered in the pool of engaged employees. So even if you answer the two of those very strongly agree and one of them neutral, that knocks you out of the pool of engaged employees. That's why many organizations who don't do kind of a focused effort engagement end up with employee engagement levels of 37%, whereas top workplaces end up with engagement in the upper 60s%, like 67%.
That's great. And you also gave a really practical example earlier of the appreciation. So in Outlook, going through and setting a reminder to try and appreciate your employees in your team, and then seeing what kind of a difference that makes. So that could also be another small example. You can do the survey as well as just taking something on for yourself and seeing if that makes a difference. Great. So thank you, Tom. We didn't get to all the questions, but we will provide you with a complete Q&A summary in the next coming days. It'll land in your inbox, so be on the lookout. Also, many of you asked for a recording of this webcast as well as the PowerPoint deck, and yes, we will definitely share that with you as well. Tom, thank you again, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us today. This wraps up today's presentation. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
In forging productive employee experiences, top workplaces care about building community and holding regular, purposeful events to foster a sense of belonging. That sense of contribution, achievement, and appreciation keeps employees connected and energized. So let's summarize. Here are our 6 hard facts that every CEO needs to know.